Polls are open in North Carolina's 9th Congressional District, where some are calling this the final race of the 2018 midterms. Democrat Dan McCready is facing off against Republican Dan Bishop in this special election. McCready initially lost the election to a different Republican in 2018 by a narrow margin. But a do-over election had to be called after several Republican campaign operatives were indicted for illegally harvesting and tampering with ballots. President Trump and Vice President Pence paid a visit to Fayetteville last night with the hopes of propelling Republican Dan Bishop to victory.
To stop the far left, you must vote in tomorrow's special election. So important. Or get your votes in early. I think a lot of... Who voted early for Dan Bishop? Good. Well, that's good. But the big thing is tomorrow. Tomorrow's the election, and you'll get out. To protect your family, you must defeat open borders. And you have a Democrat named Dan McCready, and he wants open borders. He wants sanctuary cities. He's not going to protect your Second Amendment.
Earlier, I spoke to CBS News contributor and Republican strategist Leslie Sanchez and CBSN political contributor and senior advisor to the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, Antjuan Seawright, about the implications that this race carries nationally. Leslie, I want to kick it off with you. You know, 17 points back in 2016, that this congressional district went for a Republican. The fact that both Donald Trump and Pence are campaigning there, what does that say to you?
Just how really important it is in terms of North Carolina being more of a swing state, but this is not necessarily a swing district. This is a district that's traditionally Republican, but special elections are anomalies. They're just special. It creates a lot of energy around get out the vote efforts. It's really who turns them out. But what's fascinating, Rena, is the millions of dollars that have gone into the coffers on the left and the right to kind of bolster up these candidates. For example, McCready, we were talking about that, and we mentioned it previously, was about $12 million have come into that campaign from outside the state. That doesn't include the $5 or $6 million additional dollars that are going into advertising. And it really is a very aggressive battle on the air as well as on the ground. Republicans came to the party late because they felt it was a very secure seat, but the congressional parties are now putting millions of dollars into advertising and trying to activate that base of Republican voters who are realizing it's not something to be taken for granted. They really do have to get out and vote.
You know, Antjuan, the fact that they're sort of pinpoint McCready, who is really more of a moderate Democrat, as being somebody very left-wing, and then they use the S word, socialist, as well. If you're McCready, how do you hit back against that?
Well, you don't. You let your body of work speak for you. In fact, Dan McCready has been criticized by national Democrats for not carrying the Democratic mantles to this point in the race, both last election and this election. Let me tell you about this district. A Democrat has not carried it since 1963. That was a transitional point in our nation's history, much like people would describe this time period now. It's a district that Trump won by double digits, by 12 points, and the North Carolina has a Democratic governor. He even lost the district. So it says everything about who Dan McCready is, the type of campaign, and his message. And when you look at today is not just an election in North Carolina 9. There's another special election in North Carolina 3. But the Republicans are so dead set on spending almost $15 million to save a seat that should be running away Republican. Conventional wisdom says we should not even be having a conversation about the seat. So I think it says everything about Dan McCready, the message, and the campaign he's running.
I think the $50 million is on the Democratic side because the Republicans are down a deficit of probably a triple digits in terms of how they're lining up dollar for dollar. But what's interesting is it's not one county is particularly Republican. There's some mixed counties in there. Union County tends to be the one that's much more base Republicans. That's where you're going to see some of the turnout in the suburban areas. We expect the Democrats to do well in the urban areas. And it really, I think, Rena, it says a couple of things. One, again, this is a candidate on the Republican side, Dan Bishop, who's riding very close to the messaging of Donald Trump. It's something that's worked effectively in 2018. It tends to mobilize and activate Republican voters, and the fact that you have so much money coming from organizations to the left of where the Democratic candidate is puts into question who is he going to conference with, who are going to be his allies should he get into Congress.
So if that's the takeaway from the Republican side, what's the takeaway about this election from the Democratic side, Antjuan?
One, Democrats invested heavily in the research into this district, and so the moderate Republicans who came out and voted for Dan McCready in the last election, which he lost by 905 votes, we spoke to them directly and said, what's important to you? And it was the issues. And it was everything that Donald Trump seems to be against. the type of campaign he's run has been solely focused on local issues that matter to local people. So this has not been a national campaign, very much like many of the races that Democrats won in 18 and places where we lost in 16. So it's been a laser focus on issues, and the fact that the Republican candidate has continued to cuddle and play footsie with the Trump message, and here we are, 1 or 2 points either way in the race, says everything I think about the Trump message and the type of campaign style he will.